everybody. This is my billionth attempt at recording the audio for The Beauty's Blade by Feng Ren Zuo Shu. So, let us begin with Chapter 1. Chapter 1. Ye Shengyan. She had particularly beautiful hands, the skin luminously pale and the fingers delicately tapered. Hands like these, the hands of the young lady of a wealthy house, should have been plucking chin strings or holding an embroidery needle. Instead, they just so happened to grasp the hilt of a sword. If those hands were beautiful, then their owner was even more so. Never mind those lustful young masters. The bloom of her smile made even children and the elderly catch their breaths and drink deep of her alluring gaze. A beauty like her smiled often. The curve of her lips was like a rich wine, tempting enough for anyone to drown in it. The self-proclaimed heroes of the Jianghu wanted her, and so did the villains who believed their martial skills without equal. Each of them was certain that only a true warrior like himself would be a proper match for the most beautiful woman in the world. Unfortunately, all those moved to action by their lust were stymied by the fact that this goddess among mortals was Fu Wanqing. Hundreds of years ago, to stand against the threat of evil in the Jianghu, so-called righteous warriors had formed the Light Path Alliance. Now 5 families dominated the rest: Tianzang Sect, the House of Valor, Hawk's Roost, the Arcane Order, and the Weiyang Company. Of these 5, the House of Valor was the strongest. Its master was Fu Hui, first among the righteous martial warriors of the Wulin. And Fu Hui's only daughter was the infamous Fu Wanqing. Over the years, the righteous Wulin had evolved and transformed, while the dark side slaughtered each other until only the Jadewater Guild remained. All the disciples of demonic sects obeyed the guild's orders. A breeze fluttered through Fu Wanqing's hair, revealing eyes glittering with mirth. The old man in gray beside her immediately lowered his head and looked away. "My lady," he said respectfully, "there's—" Fu Wanqing giggled. "Throw them out." She flicked her fingers. A beam of green-blue light flew past her, her sword slotting with perfect precision into its faraway sheath. Fu Wanqing didn't even bother to look in its direction. "Uncle Rong, don't you know me by now? Throw all those visiting young lords out." "No," said Fu Rong. He looked away from her sword and swallowed. "The high priestess of the Jadewater Guild has come to Jiangnan." "Ye Shengyan!" Fu Wanqing's eyes abruptly lit up. She licked her lips, grinning again. "I know what she's here for." "When Lo Kaxin, her Shijie, came to the Central Plains 3 years ago, I snapped the tendons in both her legs. There's one more medicinal ingredient Ye Shengyan needs to heal her, and, well, it's right here in the House of Valor. No wonder she's come personally." Ye Shengyan was a legendary figure. Although she was the high priestess of the demonic guild, virtually no one in the Jianghu spoke poorly of her. They could curse the demonic disciples until they were blue in the face. They wouldn't speak one single word against Ye Shengyan because of her sword and because of her face. In all the vastness of the Jianghu, the only person with looks on par with Fu Wanqing was Ye Shengyan. If 1/5 of the Jianghu's men were devoted to their own lovers, and 2/5 were obsessed with Fu Wanqing, and then the rest worshipped Ye Shengyan, anticipation rose in Fu Wanqing's heart, or perhaps it was jealousy. "Where is she now?" she asked coolly, running her fingers over the jade ring on her thumb. Fu Rong took a moment to reply. "The House of Flowing Gold," he said reluctantly. The beauties on offer at the House of Flowing Gold were famously enthralling. All visitors to Yangzhou, no matter who they were, called the House of Flowing Gold to indulge in drunken revelry among those perfumed flowers. That near-constant smile on Fu Wanqing's face disappeared, and her entire bearing sharpened like the edge of a sword. She recalled some Jianghu rumors about the Jadewater Guild. Was it true love, or merely careless debauchery? Fu Wanqing gave an icy snort, the smile returning to her face. "She's not worthy of Ye Shengyan." She meant Lo Kaxin. Fu Wanqing had never met Ye Shengyan, but she knew of her looks and temperament from descriptions spread across the Jianghu. She had, however, met Lo Kaxin. She was reckless, impulsive, and arrogant, and lacked the skills to back it up. If none of the men in the Jianghu were worthy of Ye Shengyan, Lo Kaxin certainly wasn't. Based on our reports, Ye Shengyan was lured in after helping a fallen elder to their feet. It's doubtful she knows what that place is. The House of Flowing Gold has proclaimed their acquisition of a fearless beauty far and wide. They've already sent invitations to everyone in the city. Tonight, the highest bidder gets to have her. Fu Rong faltered. The smile radiating from Fu Wanqing forced him back a few steps. Her smile was still in place, but years of experience with Fu Wanqing told him she was seething. Yu Shengyan is mine, she snapped. No one else may touch her. She sent out a palm strike and reduced a nearby boulder to dust. Fu Rong looked at that pile of gravel and shook his head slightly. People spoke of the master of the house as first among the Wulin. When they mentioned the young lady, they'd merely refer to her as the most beautiful woman in the world, or the young mistress of the House of Valor. They had no idea she had long since surpassed her father. Fu Rong knew what Fu Wanqing was getting at. But just as he was about to issue instructions to his subordinates, she shocked them again. "Hold it!" she cried. "Have them prepare a horse. I'll go myself." A thoroughbred charged past the courtyard gates in a flamboyant whirl of black hair and crimson robes. At the sound of clumping hooves, the people on the street rushed to get out of the way. A man directly in the horse's path crouched down with his arms over his head, awaiting the doom that was soon to befall him. Wind tore at his clothes. With a loud whinny, the horse and the beauty astride it flew over his head, leaving only a dazzling scarlet afterimage. The man stood up and stared dazedly after her. Someone smacked him on the shoulder. "What do you think you're looking at? That red rose of a woman is the House of Valor's young mistress. What right do you have to set your sights on her?" In the ensuing outburst of laughter and teasing, the man was shaken to his senses. His face went red. "It's not just me," he mumbled as he went to pick up his scattered belongings. "I doubt any man in the world is a match for her." Fu Wanqing rode to the House of Flowing Gold. At the doors, she leapt from her horse and threw the reins to the servant, ignoring their shouts as she swept inside. No one in Yangzhou City could fail to recognize her as Fu Wanqing, and no one would dare stop her. Though there would likely be a new rumor to bandy about the Jianghu concerning Fu Wanqing's preferences for the pleasure of women rather than the swords of heroes. The sickening sweetness of perfumed makeup filled the expansive hall. Drunken men sat with half-lidded eyes, one arm around the girl in their lap while the other reached for the girl pouring wine. Only the dregs of society came to the first floor of the House of Flowing Gold, and the beauties that waited on them were the establishment's lower ranked. As Fu Wanqing hurried up the rosewood stairs, she heard rough pants and stifled mules through the halls. She snatched at a passing servant, but her interrogation was cut short by the sound of a distant qin playing in the room at the end of the hallway. It was her. It was Yu Shengyan. Fu Wanqing didn't know how she sensed it, or why she was so certain, but she threw that bothersome servant aside and rushed toward the music. Her hand was on the blackwood door when she hesitated. If it really was Yu Shengyan, what should she do? And what should she do if it wasn't? The disconcerting realization struck her that she didn't even know why she was here. Was she seeking a duel with Yu Shengyan like the one 3 years ago? That's where she snapped the tendons in Lo Kaxin's legs? As soon as she thought of it, hunger flared to life inside her heart like a ball of flame. Yes, Fu Wanqing was seeking Yu Shengyan to cross swords with her. Only one of them could live. She would not allow anyone to speak of herself and Yu Shengyan in the same breath. Fu Wanqing pushed the door open and strode inside. The woman within didn't seem surprised in the slightest, and her qin playing continued uninterrupted. A sheer veil hung between them, and Fu Wanqing couldn't get a good look at her face. A breeze came through the intricately carved window frame, and fragrant smoke rose from a duckwood censer in lingering spirals. The woman behind the drapes appeared almost like a mirage. The music was perfect in clarity and tone, every sound exquisitely expressed, as unfathomable as an abyss and as insurmountable as a distant mountain peak. If the player summoned internal force as she played, the music could easily have become a fatal strike. Fu Wanqing tensed, killing intent flickering in her eyes. Her hand closed around the hilt of her sword. But then the music changed, becoming slow and delicately lingering, gentle as a soft springtime breeze. Somehow, it captured Fu Wanqing's attention and brought her wholly into the scene visualized by the player. When the song came to an end, she found her palms were sweating. Yu Shengyan! You're Yu Shengyan! Fu Wanqing jolted to her feet. Heedless of propriety, she brushed that sheer veil aside and charged in. A woman dressed all in white sat beside the qin stand, her expression cold with perfect indifference. Fu Wanqing had never believed that she could feel inferior to any woman, but she was sure that anyone would when faced with Yu Shengyan. The thought only lasted a moment, though, before it was snuffed out. The gleam of Fu Wanqing's blade shone in her eyes and her smile. Your Shujie fell to my sword 3 years ago. Aren't you going to take revenge? Chapter 2, House of Gold. Yu Shengyan glanced at the sword pressed to her neck, at its terribly sharp blade, which could have pierced her throat with the slightest flick. Her expression remained apathetic. She looked up at the beaming woman in front of her. "Revenge," she said flatly. "My Shijie was weak. Why should I take revenge?" The woman who seethed with enmity. Yu Shengyan knew who she was, but to her no one was ever any more than a passing traveler. With a sweep of her sleeves, she leaped up and landed several yards away, cool and distant, like a woman without a soul. Her indifference infuriated Fu Wanqing. With a flick of her sword and no thought to Yu Shengyan, she sent out 72 strikes. In the blink of an eye, all of Yu Shengyan's escape routes were sealed. She was going to duel her. They were going to have an all-out fight. The very thought made Fu Wanqing strike out fiercely. Yu Shengyan defended herself, but she never advanced. Amid the storm of sword glares, her footwork was dazzlingly light. Whenever Fu Wanqing struck, Yu Shengyan dodged, every single time. In the wake of the clashing barrage, nearly everything in the room was destroyed. Ferocious sword energy flared out through the window, upsetting a pot of flowers hanging on the ledge. Yu Shengyan leapt to its rescue, but Fu Wanqing's ruthless sword met her there. Yu Shengyan twisted backward just in time to evade her blade, though it sheared off a lock of her hair. The room sank into a silence deep enough to hear a pin drop. Yu Shengyan ran a thoughtless hand through her hair and resettled the potted plant. Before turning back to Fu Wanqing, "Enough," she said, voice light. "I've lost. Lady Fu, you may leave." Fu Wanqing was still incensed. She couldn't even force one of her habitual false smiles. The corners of her mouth twitched stiffly upward, and she tightened the grip on her sword. "That didn't count!" she shouted. "You didn't even draw your weapon! Where's your unseen sword?" "Lady Fu," exasperation crept into Yu Shengyan's tone. "We have no quarrel. I will not fight you. I don't care for fame or riches. I will not grant you the duel you want. This room has been thoroughly destroyed, and I'm afraid I won't be able to pay for it. The house's master will be upset." Rage sparked in Fu Wanqing's eyes. Approaching Yu Shengyan, she stared into her impassive face. She tightened her hands into fists inside her sleeves to avoid grabbing Yu Shengyan by the collar. This woman had gotten on every single one of her nerves from the moment they met. Fu Wanqing could never control her emotions around her. "I'll pay for it," she insisted. "And who says we have no quarrel? You're the high priestess of the demonic guild, and I'm the only daughter of the Light Path Alliance leader. We were born enemies! Duel me!" She hissed the words through clenched teeth. "That's even more reason not to fight." Yu Shengyan shook her head and sighed. "The people of the Wulin are already prejudiced against the Jadewater Guild. If I duel you, our reputation will be unsalvageable. I refuse to draw my sword. You should go." "Ma'am!" A shaking voice came into earshot. The servant desperately clutched at the doorframe, shuddering as they looked into the room. "Master asks that you go." The servant didn't even look at them. As soon as they delivered their message, they fled as if a tiger was at their back. An idea popped into Fu Wanqing's head. "I'm busy. Please see yourself out." With those parting words, Yu Shengyan left the room. Fu Wanqing watched her go, her lips curling into a splendid smile. A day in the House of Flowing Gold was worth the cost of 1,000-fold. Those lustful young masters had nearly driven themselves mad before they caught so much as a glimpse of that legendary beauty. Fu Wanqing sat in a little room on the second floor, only allowing herself to look down once she'd sent all those simpering servants away. Those willing to venture inside the House of Flowing Gold were mostly Jianghu warriors. The wealthy businessmen and powerful officials might have had money or status, but they still feared those ruthless blades, and most common people did all they could to avoid the people of the Jianghu. Among the crowd, she saw those from righteous sects and those from darker paths, insignificant nobodies and the stuff of legend alike. Auctioning off a woman as if she were an object? Absolutely despicable! Fu Wanqing smiled, but her eyes were cold enough to cause frostbite. She watched those deranged men bid exorbitant sums to buy a beauty's favor, steady the old madam with her face sagging with wrinkles, and her gaze pierced the heavy drapes that hid Yu Shengyan, who didn't even know she was being sold off. One of the young masters stood up, flicking out his fan, whispers rising around him. 1,000 taels. He hid his faint smile with a fan, gesturing airily. Of gold. The crowd fell silent. Fu Wanqing recognized him. Guo Caifei, the only son of the Gold King Guo Daiyong. Guo Daiyong had once been the head of the Weiyang Company before he had gone into the gold mining business and become filthy rich almost overnight. He was a friend to many in the Jianghu, but his son was every bit a spoiled wastrel. Smugness scrawled itself over Guo Caifei's features. Anyone else? I'll rate you 1 copper penny! A spate of mad laughter came drifting in. Like a gale of wind, a little man, both short and fat, came whirling into the room. Oh, fat phobia. Yeah. His hand only touched Guo Caifei's shoulder for an instant, but he went flying like a kite off a string. He crashed to the ground, yowling, and couldn't get up for a long time. The newcomer had hair as scraggly as horseweed, leering with blackened and yellow teeth. He was hideous. When people spoke of ugly, lustful men who used their scant martial skills to despoil women, they meant people like him. The 4 rats of Black Peak, as they were known, lacked all morals, and those present had already recognized the newcomer as one of them, Jaime Shu. His martial skills weren't impressive. He was weaker than many of the assembled men, but the 4 rats moved in a pack. Those in the crowd could fight off 1, but perhaps not all 4, and behind them stood the might of Black Peak Hall. For a moment, everyone only watched, unsure of how to proceed. Someone spat. "Fourth bro, you want her in bed for 1 copper penny? Dream on." There came another shrill cackle. A small, wiry man leapt down from the roof, and with further shrieks, the other 2 rats came crawling from the other 2 corners of the room. They had no care at all for their own griminess, patting mindlessly at the dirt that covered them. "Hurry up and get out!" one shouted, "unless you want to fight me for my woman." Around them, the room emptied out. A pack of cowards, thought Fu Wanqing as she watched the young masters go. With Yu Shengyan's skills, dealing with these 4 would be as easy as breathing. But the thought of these lowlives catching sight of her face annoyed Fu Wanqing profoundly. She leapt down from the balcony, facing the ugly foursome with a smile. "What if I said yes?" Her expression instantly melted the 4 rats. Jaime Shu stared at Fu Wanqing with greed shining in his eyes. "Come here, gorgeous. Forget that yen something. I want you instead." "Fourth bro, you're insane! You're thinking with the wrong head. Can't you see who she is?" Apparently, one of the 4 rats of Black Peak still possessed a brain. He shook himself out of his momentary stupor and plastered a polite expression back on his face. "Lady Fu, we'll keep to ourselves. You enjoy yourself, and we'll enjoy our woman." Fu Wanqing giggled, cocking her head and batting her eyelashes. "What if I want her too?" For an instant, their expressions froze. Then malice seeped in. Jaime Shu was the first to lose his composure. "Go fuck yourself!" he roared. "You little bitch! Can't you tell when you're being offered a way out? Do you really think your House of Valor is worth all that? Remember, insulting Black Peak is the same as insulting the Jadewater Guild." Fu Wanqing struck out her hand, and the resulting strike hit Jaime Shu in the face. He went flying into a pillar and crashed to the ground, completely dazed. Now that Fu Wanqing had attacked, the 4 rats dropped their neutral stance. Their weapons came hissing out of their sheaths, but they were still only watching, hesitant, as if assessing Fu Wanqing's abilities. "The Light Path Alliance has always been the enemy of the Demonic Guild. Have you forgotten?" Fu Wanqing laughed. These failures weren't worthy of the sword in her hand. "Let's charge! Take her down and we'll have something sweet for the first course." Blinded by lust to the very end. Fu Wanqing batted her lashes and leaned against the table as if she hadn't noticed the filth they were spewing. Weapons came at her from all directions, but she didn't move a muscle. Not because she couldn't dodge, but because her attackers were already dead. What threat could come from weapons wielded by corpses? A shame about her blood-stained clothes, though. Without a moment's hesitation, Fu Wanqing tore off her outer robe and threw it aside. She glanced at the quaking madam of the house. "The 1,000 taels of gold. I'll pay for it." "Take Lady Fu too." Before the woman could finish, Fu Wanqing leaped up the stairs. The room was neat and elegantly appointed. Yu Shengyan pushed open the door with a creak. Nothing in her gaze changed when she saw Fu Wanqing, as if she'd known she would find her here. She sat down across from her. "I smell blood," she said lightly. "You've killed people." Fu Wanqing scoffed. "They deserve to die." She met Yu Shengyan's gaze and grinned, rising to her feet to place a hand on her shoulder. Her lips curled up further as she felt Yu Shengyan shudder. Then she plucked herself into her lap. Fu Wanqing put her hands around Yu Shengyan's neck. "The House of Flowing Gold," she cooed. "The House of Flowing Gold. Do you know what kind of place it is?" Chapter 3. Painted Nudes. Very few people in the world could resist the enchantment of Fu Wanqing's smile, but Yu Shengyan managed it. Apart from a minute shiver at first, she never moved. She didn't so much as blink when Fu Wanqing sat in her lap. It wasn't because she was a woman that she was immune to Fu Wanqing's charms. Rather, it was because she was Yu Shengyan. Yu Shengyan, the renowned high priestess of the demonic guild, the Jianghu's one and only Yu Shengyan of the unseen sword. Fu Wanqing's arms were around her neck. Their shallow breaths mingled. Their faces drew closer together until only the slightest gap remained. One burned like fire and the other like ice. When two women of such utter opposites came together, their union was shockingly harmonious, impossibly magnificent. Yu Shengyan gazed into Fu Wanqing's laughing eyes, but saw only her own reflection. Yu Shengyan hadn't answered her question. She didn't know what kind of place this was, nor did she care to. She hadn't been the one to knock the old lady down, but she had accidentally dropped her while helping her up. She had agreed to stay one night in the House of Flowing Gold in compensation. Outside, night was falling. The colorful hanging lanterns were glowing brightly. Yu Shengyan's unflappable demeanor deepened the frustration in Fu Wanqing's heart. The high priestess of a demonic guild ought to have a cruel nature and a thirst for blood. But anyone who met Yu Shengyan on the street could think she was an elegant young lady from a rich family or a celestial goddess banished to the earth. They'd never suspect this was that terrifying demon priestess. When Fu Wanqing was displeased, she wanted everyone around her to feel it too. That was just the type of person she was. Unfortunately for her, she was part of the Fu clan. Her father was an illustrious hero revered by the Jianghu. She'd been a figurehead for righteousness from the moment she was born, and under all that public scrutiny, she had little choice but to conform to the expected mold. After years of all that pressure, she spent every waking moment craving the freedom of total indulgence. One thought has always haunted her. What if she'd been born in the demonic guild? Would she have already destroyed the righteous Wolin of the Central Plains? Fu Wanqing gave a burbling laugh. She'd forgotten for a moment that she was in Yu Shengyan's lap, and when she leaned back, she nearly slid off. Hands wrapped around her waist, pulling her upright once more. Fu Wanqing reached out unthinkingly, pressing at whatever was in front of her, but the softness she found stunned her to silence. She yanked her hands back as if burned, but the speed made her look even guiltier. Fu Wanqing certainly wouldn't admit to it, though. She put her arms back around Yu Shengyan's shoulders, pressing herself close until her mouth was at Yu Shengyan's ear. She whispered, voice flickering with humorous allure. "Oh, the House of Flowing Gold is a place for men to have their fun. Women can come here for boy toys of their own, of course, but you disciples of the Jadewater Guild aren't quite the same." Fu Wanqing's eyes glittered, her gaze like the satin flick of a feather against one's heart. A hint of confusion rose in Yu Shengyan's eyes. "What do you mean?" Fu Wanqing exhaled gently against Yu Shengyan's ear. She was loath to part from the chill fragrance of her body, but Yu Shengyan's profound ignorance was such a rarity that Fu Wanqing felt duty-bound to fill the gap in her knowledge. She herself came quite often to the House of Flowing Gold, if not for the reasons most people did. She visited solely for violence, but as time passed, she gradually figured some things out. Fu Wanqing slithered from Yu Shengyan's lap and went to one of the cabinets. Pushing it open and fishing for a booklet of paintings, she smacked it down in front of Yu Shengyan and calmly sat back down across from her, awaiting the crimson flush sure to overtake her face. Yu Shengyan reached for the booklet. Instantly, Fu Wanqing's eyes caught on her fingers. Unlike her own hands, Yu Shengyan's were lightly calloused from use of her sword. Having discovered an imperfection, Fu Wanqing smiled in satisfaction. Pages flicked loudly. Yu Shengyan read at great speed. She went through the entire thing in the span of a single pot of tea. Her face did not change, her eyes remaining coolly distant. Fu Wanqing recalled sneakily looking at erotic pictures when she was younger, still girlishly embarrassed and terrified of getting caught. But Yu Shengyan flipped through this booklet as if she was reading saintly teachings. Had Fu Wanqing grabbed the wrong book? She looked over Yu Shengyan's shoulder and immediately got an eyeful of a couple happily entwined. The room was silent, apart from their hushed breathing and the flipping of pages. Yu Shengyan reached the final page and put the book down. I finished it, she said lightly. Fu Wanqing was at a total loss for words. After a moment, irritation overtook her. Now do you understand what kind of place this is? Do you realize what staying here overnight means? If you wanted to leave, no one could stop you. But I promised that old lady I would stay, Yue Shengyan replied. Good! Anger sparked in Fu Wanqing's eyes. She stared at Yue Shengyan, biting out every word. I've given her the gold, which means I buy you for the night. I want a duel. Let's go to the back courtyard. I know you've come here from the demonic guild. If you win, I'll give you the medicine you're looking for. Yue Shengyan's eyes lit up. She knew the medicine was kept in the House of Valor, and that Fu Wanqing just so happened to be that house's lady, but she had her own principles and position, and she refused to win the medicine in a duel. In the end, she shook her head. I cannot fight you. Fu Wanqing stared at her. Why? She so clearly wanted it. Why was she holding herself back? The apathy finally dropped from Yue Shengyan's face, and a deep darkness rose in her eyes. Inside her sleeves, her fingers tightened into fists. The unseen sword only leaves a chief to kill, and I don't want to kill you. That person had told her the thirst for blood consumed the wielder's original nature. She could not take life out of a momentary impulse. Fu Wanqing scoffed. And you're so sure you'd win? Yue Shengyan didn't respond, but she was sure. She'd taken Fu Wanqing's measure when she attacked her. She was stronger than the Jianghu gave her credit for, but she was not Yue Shengyan's equal. Yue Shengyan was not one to boast, but those peaceful eyes of hers had never judged wrongly. Her gaze pinned Fu Wanqing down like a weight of a mountain range, leaving her struggling to breathe. Her sword was suddenly drawn and pressed against Yue Shengyan's jade-like neck, leaving a line of blood. Did Yue Shengyan fear her, or did she think Fu Wanqing beneath her? Either option infuriated Fu Wanqing, but she too had her principles, and she would not fight an unarmed opponent. Under Yue Shengyan's serene gaze, she felt the flames of her own rage slowly snuff out. Annoyed, Fu Wanqing sheathed her sword and sat down sloppily on the stool. I don't care. I bought you for the night, so you have to do as I say. How many years had passed since Lady Fu had indulged in such shameless whining? She pursed her mouth in embarrassment almost as soon as the words left her tongue. Yue Shengyan ignored her. I promised the woman I'd stay one night, she said coolly, but I never agreed to duel anyone. Fu Wanqing jolted to her feet. What if a man came in here? You won't duel me, but what about rolling in bed with a man? Would you do that? Yue Shengyan shot her a glance. But it was you who came. That brought Fu Wanqing up short for a moment, but she soon regained her footing. Yue Shengyan, she said with a laugh, between the two of us, there must be one victor. I don't care if you— My lady! Before Fu Wanqing could finish, a man dressed in gray rushed in, mopping out a sweaty brow, gasping for breath. My lady, Master heard you got into a fight at the House of Flowing Gold. He's furious, and he wants you back at the manor right now. Impatience flickered in Fu Wanqing's eyes. She wasn't in the mood to talk to Yue Shengyan anymore. Glaring at the servant, she shouted, Then hurry up! The rumors had flown across Yangzhou in a scant few hours, and by now, even her old man had heard. Fu Wanqing knew exactly what kind of nonsense people would be spreading about her, that Lady Fu preferred pleasure to duty, and that she spent inconceivable riches on the favors of a beautiful woman, that Lady Fu would stoop to an all-out brawl to take someone else's girl. Humiliating accusations, to be sure. Fu Wanqing threw back her head and laughed in sheer delight. Chapter 4. Nighttime Guest. Beneath the paintings of the four seasons that hung inside the great hall, steam rose softly from teacups on the rosewood table. The cushions on two of the wooden chairs were slightly indented. It was clear guests had just left. A middle-aged man in scholar's robes stood with his back to the doors, twisting his beard in his hands. Suddenly, his ears pricked up, and he whirled around with a shout. So you finally decided to come home! What a mess! You've made yourself a laughingstock for nothing! His yowling boomed in her ears like thunder, but it was her lilting laugh that drifted into the room first, followed by her fiery red-garbed silhouette. Fu Wanqing faced her enraged father without any fear in her eyes. She reached for a painted porcelain cup before her brows furrowed with distaste. With a sweep of her sleeves, the cup went hurtling toward the doors. No one in the House of Valor was what they seemed. Even the servants possessed formidable martial skills. The man leapt into the air at once, flipping in midair to perform a seamless catch. He landed with the cup held firmly. Not a single drop spilled. Meanwhile, a servant girl dressed in pink had already brought in a new tea tray and prepared a fresh cup for Fu Wanqing. Fu Fu Wanqing sipped at it, her eyes lidded in satisfaction. What did you summon me for, Dad? Fu Hui stared at her, eyes bulging, his fists clenched with the force of his outrage. Sudden energy shifted around him, billowing through his blue robes. Teacups clinked together, shaking from the outpouring of true qi. Fu Wanqing was unintimidated by his display. Crossing her legs, she hummed one of the ditties she'd heard in the brothel. Only when her tune was finished did she speak, her voice light and easy. Are you just mad I went to the House of Flowing Gold? Surely something so trivial wouldn't enrage you so, would it? I see you had guests. Did something important happen in the Jianghu again? Honestly, Dad, leading the Light Path Alliance has brought you nothing but trouble. You have to chase down every single little thing, and you fly into the rage at the tiniest incidents. Be quiet! Shouted Fu Hui, kneading at his temples. Some of the tension slowly melted from his face. Wanqing, this is no laughing matter, he sighed, stroking his beard. I'm sure you know the Demonic Guild's high priestess, Ye Shengyan, has come to the Central Plains. Rumor is she's looking for something to heal her Shijie's legs. And what a coincidence! On this very day, your Uncle Zhong of the Arcane Order was murdered with no witnesses. His wounds have the mark of the unseen sword. Only Ye Shengyan possesses the skills to wield that blade. Fu Wanqing's lazy smile disappeared. Her expression turned grave. You mean Ye Shengyan came to Yangzhou with an ulterior motive, Dad? Has the Demonic Guild made any moves? When did Uncle Zhong pass away? 2 hours ago, Fu Hui replied. Fu Wanqing let out a breath of relief. She shook her head. It wasn't her, she said, shaking her head. How do you know? Fu Wanqing laughed. Because she was with me the whole time. But just because Ye Shengyan had nothing to do with it doesn't mean the rest of the Demonic Guild didn't. The 4 rats of Black Pea showed up in Yangzhou out of nowhere tonight. I killed them. Maybe the guild really does have something up its sleeve. But what does that have to do with me? Fu Wanqing nearly said it out loud, but the sight of her father, who'd done so much for the wretched Wu Lin, made her swallow the words back down. She brought her hand to her mouth and yawned, feigning exhaustion. Dad, I'm tired. Let's talk about this tomorrow. Of course. Fu Hui knew his daughter. He gave a helpless shrug and gestured for her to go. Her, a hope for a successor? He spent more time hoping she'd just cause a little less trouble. Half the problems in the Jianghu were caused by Fu Wanqing herself. The crescent moon hung like a sickle in the sky, flanked by dotted stars. An autumn breeze rustled through the seam of the open window, ruffling a lock of Fu Wanqing's hair that hung over her face. The curve of her lips deepened, something glinted from her fingertips and sank behind the painted screen. The room remained silent but for Fu Wanqing's own breathing. Her brows drew together in confusion as she stepped closer to the screen with its ink-washed landscape. She caught sight of a silhouette. She relaxed in relief, only to return to tense weariness in the next breath. Disciples stood guard on the House of Valor, and there were arcane rays always active. It was impossible for an intruder to enter unannounced. So how could she be standing here? Was she really that all-powerful? Fu Wanqing bit her lower lip, her mouth twisting in dissatisfaction. With a sweep of her sleeves, she sat in front of the dressing room mirror and ran her hands through her hair. When a coolly reserved reflection appeared in the copper mirror, she laughed. Fancy seeing you here. Couldn't stay away from me, could you? Rumor has it that the women of the Jadewater Guild are all saps. Perhaps there's some truth to it after all. Ye Shengyan's sleeves were pockmarked with holes, courtesy of Fu Wanqing's hidden darts. The wounds on her neck were already paled and scabbing over. Fu Wanqing's gaze slid from her sleeves to her neck, then on to linger to Ye Shengyan's faintly pursed lips. From the drawer, she drew out a handkerchief and strode to Ye Shengyan, pressed the white silk to her throat. She smirked maliciously. If I wanted to, she said, tightening her grip, I could break your neck right now. Ye Shengyan only glanced at Fu Wanqing for a moment before she looked away. She said softly. Her apathy, insubstantial as smoke, filled Fu Wanqing with an exasperation wholly new to her. Why did you come? She asked once more. To steal the Millennium Tortoise gallbladder for your Shijie? Or to take another peek at me? Those last words were simmered with seduction. She put a hand on Ye Shengyan's shoulder and nestled against her, with no care for the fact that Ye Shengyan was the high priestess of the Demonic Guild, or that she was a woman. Ye Shengyan pushed her away, putting some distance between them. You said you paid for me. I'll leave when the day breaks. However, I will not duel you. As for the gallbladder, I'll come for it another time. I have no interest in stealing. Her words only amused Fu Wanqing. Did you forget where you are? The House of Valor is ruled by the leader of the Light Path Alliance, the sworn enemy of the Demonic Guild. Not even a common follower of your guild could come up and go unscathed, to say nothing of you, the High Priestess herself. Do you think the House of Valor will give you the medicine just because you ask politely? I'm afraid you won't leave with the gallbladder, or, for that matter, with your life." Yu Shengyan frowned. This didn't seem to have occurred to her. How did someone like her become the High Priestess of the Demonic Guild? Fu Wanqing's smile remained unchanged. "Here's something you might not know. Just as he came to Yangzhou, Zhongtian, the leader of the Arcane Order, was murdered. The wounds on his body match those inflicted by the Unseen Sword. Many suspect you, but you don't need to worry. Zhongtian's sons, Zhong Shiling and Zhong Shixiu, both worship you. They're sure to speak on your behalf." "I didn't know that," said Yu Shengyan. Fu Wanqing giggled. "Of course, you didn't kill him, but the question of whether your guild headquarters ordered it remains. Why did the forests of Black Peak appear in Yangzhou so suddenly? Black Peak is one of the 4 halls of the Jadewater Guild, isn't it? I heard it's led by the right-hand deputy, Lo Ka-xin. You're the High Priestess. Why come all this way when you should be managing things in your guild? Aren't you worried that your disciples will cause trouble while you're gone?" Yu Shengyan furrowed her brows. The 4 rats of Black Peak? The Jadewater Guild was made up of 4 separate halls. Black Peak and White Peak belonged to the right-hand deputy, Lo Ka-xin, while the left-hand deputy, Wei Xian, led Amber Hill and Crimson Hill. Yu Shengyan spent her time training in seclusion and didn't involve herself in the guild's management. She had never heard of the 4 rats of Black Peak. Fu Wanqing covered her mouth and laughed, glancing at Yu Shengyan's pale face. "They claim they have the Jadewater Guild's backing to do all kinds of things. At the House of Flowing Gold, they tried to buy a night with you. Yu Shengyan, for 1 copper penny. If you stop to think about it, I got swindled. 1,000 taels of gold is no small sum." She paused, studying Yu Shengyan's expression. Her own face was the picture of regret. "What a terrible tragedy. I paid for the night of a lifetime, and I can't do a single thing." To her surprise, Yu Shengyan nodded in complete earnestness. "You're absolutely right, Lady Fu. Upon my return home, shall I send the gold to your manor?" Fu Wanqing froze. Was this woman a genius or a complete idiot? She made no pretensions to sophistication whatsoever. She was as untouched by mortal affairs as a recluse hidden away in the mountains. Realizing this, Fu Wanqing knew she had to make full use of it. She no longer cared whether this really was Yu Shengyan's true nature or not. She was a rare source of entertainment in the life of ceaseless monotony that was worth far more than a duel. Fu Wanqing tilted her chin, smiling brilliantly, and licked her lips. "I don't care about gold." Yu Shengyan didn't expect that. A hint of unease touched her eyes. Fu Wanqing crooked her fingers and beckoned Yu Shengyan closer. "I want you to stay here with me. Not for very long, just 3 months. You don't manage the Jadewater Guild, so it won't interfere with anything over there. At the end of those 3 months, I'll give you the gallbladder you want. Your Shijie has been crippled for 3 years already. She can wait a bit longer." With barely a moment's consideration, Yu Shengyan nodded her assent. So yeah, that should be all. So with this book, I don't think I will read the entire thing since the original website only has the first 23 chapters up, so I might stop at chapter 23 since I want to respect the wishes of the original Chinese author. So yeah, please do support the author. We would not have such amazing stories without the hard work of these authors. And let me know if you want me to read any other baihe. So yeah, goodbye. See you in the next one. But I have finals soon, so I probably won't get part 2 up anytime soon. But I still hope you enjoyed this, and yeah, goodbye.